Good morning and welcome to another episode of Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. I am DM Bloodworth, and as you can see by the graphics, making my return to taking a deeper look into Advanced Dungeons & Dragons First Edition, answering the question of why is it still so playable, and assumed now it is still so playable. And today's video, I'm focusing on the much recently maligned Oriental Adventures. So I expect this video to be, possibly controversial in a few ways. Um, and I don't shy away from controversy, especially on this channel. Although I want to keep it as focused and constructive as possible. Before I actually go into what the authors have written about this book in the foreword and the the preface and everything, I will talk about my own history with this particular game supplement. So here I have the original, just so you know, everything that I have in this series, I've recently purchased, on eBay and managed to get copies as cheaply as I possibly could in still decent condition. And so far, I've been very, very lucky in doing that. And to have gotten this for under $50 right now is really quite rare because the controversy around Oriental Adventures had basically skyrocketed the price of all first edition books on eBay. Um, and this also, the controversy around this book, and I'm going to say it's unfounded controversy, but that's my take on it. The controversy surrounding this book also generated a disclaimer that Wizards of the Coast placed on all TSR products found on DriveThruRPG. And I will relate a little bit into that as well. Although I have a previous video that talks about that particular issue in a little bit more focus, and I will attach that video to this, to the end of this video, so that you can see my take on there, so I don't have to spend too much time with that. But my personal experience with this, back in 1985, this book was released, and I, of course, purchased this book back in 1985. However, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons was not our game of choice for this genre of fantasy fiction. We were playing Bushido, which is Fantasy Grounds Unlimited, and that was our Shogun miniseries, TV miniseries connection. And that's basically why this book was released when it was as well. It was meant to tap into the boom that was taking place surrounding Shogun, the TV series in particular, but there were a lot of Chinese action movies and Japanese samurai slash ninja movies that were coming out at the time. And it was just really a popular time for this genre. And so when Oriental Adventures was released, we of course got it and we looked through it, but we didn't actually play it at the time. We didn't. We had our fix, done with that, with the other game. So now when I look through this again, 35 years later, I started to realize that because I recently played Bushido, I started to realize that this today would be my go-to to feed that that itch to actually go in and take care of it and play this, rather than that, because of the familiarity with the system and the simplicity of the system as well. And this still does capture that flavor. I wouldn't necessarily put a AD&D adventure in Karator, and kind of build it into a Greyhawk kind of setting. But what I would do is I would play this game system in the world that Bushido RPG, had built, which was really medieval Japan. So I would take this and put it there, and just have the Dungeons and Dragons twist, to it in that case, because it is a much simpler system. Without further ado, let me switch over to the actual PDF, and I can start reading through the notes that the various authors and editors had produced for this. So here we have, and let me switch. So here we have Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Oriental Adventures by Gary Gygax. And I want to take a look, most notably, with the special things. Whenever a project of this size is put together, there are many people who give their time and extra effort to see it through. This is particularly true for Oriental Adventures, as there was much assembling and double-checking of the final details of rules and culture. No doubt there are some who have been left off this list, but they deserve every praise nonetheless. To Joe Pickens, who produced many obscure reference books and assumed the role of chief librarian while doing all of his other work. To Harold Johnson for besting the inevitable management crisis that arose. To Frank Mentzner for his timely reviewing An Eagle Eye. To Douglas Niles, Tracy Hickman, Bruce Hurd, and Jeff Grubb for occasionally savage playtesting. To Jim Holloway for advice and movies. To David Sutherland for much fine work on graphics. To the Japanese players, Masataka Ota, Akira Saito, Hiroyasu Karuse, Takafumi Sakurai, and Yuka Tateishi for critiquing and improving the manuscript on short notice. To Mike Martin for being the calm in the Oriental Adventure storm. To Helen Cook, who deserves mention for being patient. So, to these people and everyone who may have been missed, thank you. I want to focus back on the group, to the Japanese players, and I also want to go back to where Gary talks about the double checking and the fine details of the rules and culture. This group here of Japanese players is the modern equivalent of sensitivity readers. All right. Oftentimes in the gaming session, actually, let me switch views here. Oftentimes in recent gaming culture, game companies will talk about, well, we need sensitivity readers to make sure that our product is not seen as just straight up cultural appropriation or to mischaracterize or disparage, even unintentionally, a culture that's out there. I mean, this group of individuals that TSR employed in 1985 were essentially that. All right. They were there to make sure that this product, was not offensive in any way. And there is no intent in here that would lead any rational person to believe that there was the intent to disparage in any way the cultural aspects of this system. This is not a historical piece. This is not a piece, a discussion, a social discussion of culture. This is taking the various myths from different cultures within the Orient and melding them together to produce a piece of fantasy fiction. And just the term the Orient is taken out of context in many ways, where it's like, oh well, that's an attack because you're lumping. The Orient just simply means it is not Western. All right, it is not. It is, it is outside of Western culture. All right, it's not a derogatory term. And the fact that it's looked at that way now, 35 years later, and I'll be perfectly honest, by two individuals who didn't contact the original authors, didn't play the game, didn't read through the entire volume. I believe one actually said, because I didn't watch their full 26-hour video on it, which I don't know how you can create something that long on a book this short, but they just took everything about this and took it out of context, and did not focus on just going through and reading what the first couple pages said. And so let me get back to doing just that. And the credits, he goes through the credits here. So the preface, they go through and they talk about, the AD&D connection to chainmail and such. So I want to come down to what's this? Is the creator of the whole system about to state that Oriental character types are unsuitable adventurers? Never. The fact of the matter is that the mixture of Occidental and Orient was an unsuitable combination. The game stressed a European, so AD&D stresses a European historical base and mythology. Even though the AD&D game monsters rosters ranges from far afield, it is still basic European flavor. The whole of these game systems are Occidental in flavor. The whole of these games, not Oriental. At least not in the sense of what is known as the Far East, China, Korea, Japan, and Mongolia. The early 1980 and not arrived when I began thinking about the version of AD&D game that would feature Oriental campaigns and characters. Good intentions aside, it has taken this long to achieve the desired goal, and enlisted the talents of both David Zeb Cook and Francois Marcella Freudeval. If I mispronounce names, I apologize, in order to arrive as early as 1985. Because the game system has changed over the intervening years, the exact nature of the approach taken herein differs from which was originally envisioned. I am convinced that the alteration is for the better, as you partake for information therein and put it into play. I am as certain you will concur Oriental Adventures is completely new resource for the AD&D game system, As you develop your Oriental Adventures campaign, it is recommended that you remove the monk character class from the European type campaigns. Why? Because what is found herein is superior and in the proper surroundings as well. Oriental Adventures covers the classes of adventurers, weapons, armor, spells, magic, and even the special monsters that make the legend and myth of the Far East so rich and varied. Now it is possible to place the monk, for example, in the proper setting, a place where he will encounter samurai and sohei, combat spiritual creatures, deal with bushi and wujen. Of course, schools of fighting are covered. So are the differences in weapons between China, Japan, and so on. Culture is also stressed. Honor, dignity, training in social graces and ceremonies are as important to adventurers in this milieu as are experience points and magical treasure. Think about that for a moment. In fact, this new book is aimed at providing players and dungeon masters with the material they need to develop the other half of the fantasy world, the Oriental portion. Once this has been accomplished, it will be possible for adventurers to roam the whole world. Those from the Occidental marveling over the mysteries of the East, while brave characters from the Orient journey to the West to learn about the strange and incredible lore which that land holds. Similarities will certainly serve to highlight the vast differences. The purpose of Oriental Adventures is to bring a new facet to the overall game. It offers what is essentially a whole new world for development of different AD&D campaigns. The mechanics and the rules are basically the same. How could they be different? We are all humans. The professions are fairly similar, but different enough to be exotic. One the exotic becomes mundane. It should be once the exotic becomes the mundane, the time has arrived for cross-cultural adventuring. This single volume brings you not only the world of the Far East, but also the meeting of the East and the West when the fullness of time warrants such contact. Oriental Adventures is a landmark work in the game system. It brings not only new information, this book adds a whole new world. As such, this is a wonderful event that brings enthusiasts the best of two worlds, literally. So with the broad concepts behind the volume understood, it is high time to stop wasting time upon a forward. Sit down, put your feet up, and prepare to enjoy yourself through. All right, and so on and so on. So, Gary Gygax, September 1985. The introduction. So the introduction is by David Zeb Cook. And this is one of the few volumes that has a special thanks, then a passage by, a preface by Gary Gygax, an introduction by Zeb Cook, as well as by Mike Brault, before you even get to the contents. So I can't recall any other book being introduced this same way with this many different people coming in at the very beginning to explain how this supplement was developed. So, introduction, and I'll skim through this very quickly. For one thing, I finally have the chance to introduce new readers and gamers to the long-time fascination of mine, the Orient. The Orient is rich in variety and diversification. Though there are similarities among the many lands, each land has its own unique outlook and style. This is part of what makes the Oriental mysteries mysterious and exciting. The exploration and discovery of entirely different cultures, thus Oriental Adventures book is broad in scope. It does not restrict itself to a single country or time period. Presented here is material drawn from Japan, China, Korea, Mongolia, Southeast Asia, and the Philippines. The historical periods that provide inspiration are equally broad. Heian, Kamakura, Sengoku, and Tokugawa, Japan, the Han, the Tiang, Sung, and Ming China, ancient Korea, even the Mongol invasions. The second pleasure in writing this comes from the reading I had to do to prepare. The Oriental Adventures project spurred me to read material I would have otherwise never have seen. Some of it was thrilling and some not. The variety of topics was huge. Legends, folk tales, literary epics, genealogical histories, philosophy, religion, poetry, architecture, land management, government, history, martial arts, sociology, anthropology, military affairs, economics, and fiction. The bulk of this material deals with Japan, with China, a close second. This is not due to oversight. Most of the material available deals with Japan through the choice of various writers. From the standpoint of gaming, Japan's history and culture provides greater opportunities for adventure and advancement. Although often seen as a rigid society, Japan has had several periods of tumultuous upheaval where a person of any rank could make his name. It goes on to the various periods and such where that was possible, find some common connection with China as well. Thirdly, it is with great pleasure to write this because I get to rip into a new challenge. And he talks about just the challenge of writing a volume such as this, where it's going to not only introduce new classes and new features and such, but also introduce a whole new land. So this is not a separate supplement for just a setting, but it's also a game system and setting incorporated into one. All right, so referencing the works and sources of ideas went beyond the books that included popular Japanese movies about samurai and ninja, and the whole family of Hong Kong kung fu movies, comics, and even those endearing monster epics of giant reptiles and funny dinosaurs. This is all tapping into that early to mid 1980s boom of this in our entertainment industry here in the States, and obviously there in Asia as well, where these movies and characters and were just on American television and in American movie theaters, across the board. I mean, it was really huge. We go into Mike Brault's reading, and he basically goes into some of the more social aspects of it. So, in the lands of Oriental adventures, characters are not judged solely on their prowess with the sword and spell. Oriental characters' social skills and personal honor are just as important as their combat abilities. When was the last time politeness and proper manners really mattered in your campaign? How can characters associate with nobility if they know nothing of courts or court etiquette? How many AD&D characters worry about their actions reflecting upon their families and comrades? These and many other intricacies of social interactions and responsibilities are brought to light in this volume. So, a whole new aspect of thinking about your character and your character's actions, and not just how those actions will reflect upon the character, him or herself, but also how will those actions impact your family's sense of honor and standing and such as well, which is really a different, more Eastern philosophical view of a person, as opposed to Western philosophical view. We tend to think of ourselves in Western culture as, I'm an individual, what I do reflects upon me. We put our first name first and our surname last. Whereas in most, if not all, Asian cultures, it's the exact opposite. The family name comes first, followed by the individual name comes last. And that is not just a different way of writing a name. There's an actual philosophical meaning behind that. Um, and so, again, they're really looking at this project in the most sensitive way that they possibly can, in trying to teach the overall Oriental culture, in a positive and respectful manner. Before I get into some of the mechanics, because the mechanics are, once again, they're almost secondary to what the book is trying to do, and that is to incorporate Oriental adventures and the Oriental world and mindset and such into your primarily European worldview, in game worldview of whether it be Greyhawk or, by 85, I mean, Greyhawk was still the primary location where people were playing their AD&D games, unless they were, homebrewing already. Kryn was out around this time too, but primarily this is a Greyhawk setting, and this is a different continent of Greyhawk, the world of Greyhawk, that is being included here. And they go through, I mean, I'll come back over here. So they add here comeliness. So comeliness score is a new attribute that's added in. And I believe comeliness actually first appeared in Dragon Magazine, and then it's here, and then it will be incorporated into Unearthed Arcana as well. They go into the classes, so character classes and races. So class and race combinations and such. You have some Oriental races, so adding in some Oriental races. Then you have the classes. You have an Oriental Barbarian, the Bushi, the Kensai, the Monk, the Ninja, the Samurai, the Shukenja, the Sohi, the Wujen, and the Yakuza. Character abilities, and they go through and talk about alignment and such. Families, clans, and castes. So this is, again, a cultural difference between what you may have in your more European setting. And so this goes into developing that in your game world here. An honor system, which is new, introduced with this here. And then the effects of honor, money and supplements, weapons and such, armor descriptions, proficiencies, and non-proficiencies. So there are various non-weapon proficiencies that will fall under that. Spells, combat, martial arts as a separate combat style now. Remember, replacing the monk character class from AD&D, Player's Handbook and such, and now placing it squarely within this rule system. then monsters, and so on. Treasures. Then an overview of Karatur, and talks about the geography, the populations, and life, life within that whole setting. And same character abilities and such, different maximums and minimums based on the character classes or races found within this volume. And they talk about the races. So the Korobokuru are basically Oriental Dwarves. The Heijin Yokai are intelligent, shape-shifting animals. And then spirit folk are the descendants of humans and various spirits of nature. Oriental Barbarians, which they mention are unearthed, so players familiar with the barbarian class described in Unearthed Arcana should read this section carefully, as Oriental Barbarians are different from their Western counterparts. And so there's a further definition and just a difference, a differentiation between Eastern and Western barbarians. Debushi, which are basically fighters or warriors. The Kensai means sword saint or sword master, and usually applied to characters that have perfected the art of fighting with the sword. Now here we have monks, which is the replacement for the monk class of the Player's Handbook. Ninja. And I'm sure we'll have samurai. The Shukenja. So Shukenja is a wandering priest or a monk who has accepted the life of hardship and poverty. Self-sacrifice combined with devout religious beliefs places the Shukenja outside of the caste system. All right, so each of these character classes or roles are going to fall someplace within the caste system as well, and in that case outside of the caste system. So the caste system is going to be important for characters developed in this setting. The Sohei are warrior monks, religious soldiers who protect the large monasteries. Unlike Shukenja, Sohei are more militant than holy and receive very little religious instruction. The Ouijan are sorcerers, and you have a whole section on their intelligence adjustments and their spell capacity. The Yakuza are many different things depending on who is asked. They're protectors of the common man, they're thugs, they're extortionaries, they're rowdies, they're thieves, they're mercenaries, they're jack of all trades. So it's kind of hard to, truly categorize them, although they're typically depicted as being, thugs and extortioners. They're typically seen as being criminal in nature. However, they are the most common, protector of the common man as well. So and that's it's kind of like your early versions of the mafia were really, you know, people that protected the common man in their small villages. They talk about alignment. I don't spend too much time with alignment myself. Languages, families, clans, and caste. Let's see if we can find where they talk about modifiers. So, birth requirements by class. So, samurai get a +10 modifier, yakuza get a -10 modifier, and everybody else. So, the birth rank. So, you'll roll on this table and you'll either get a +10 or a -10 on this table. Npc reaction modifiers will be based. So if you're in the first rank here, so you're going to roll 2d10. And so if you add a +10 for a samurai, so let's say I rolled a 17. So a 27 would be in the fourth rank, 70% reaction modifier. D100 divided by 8 for their ancestry. Their birthright would be D100 divided by 10. And their honor would be a starting point of 28 points out of a maximum of 35. So, you know, that randomly thought of samurai would be at a 27, and if it were a yakuza, a 17 would become a 7, which puts them squarely in the middle class, would only have a 20% reaction modifier for NPCs. A d10 minus divided by 1. All right, so just d10 once for birthright, or ancestry, I should say. Birthright, d8 divided by 2, and their honor would start at only 8. Here's the ancestry chart. And so you'd start here at a 4 would be -15 to the honor and a criminal. And obviously a 99 would be a +3, a tragic event tied into their ancestry. Ancestry will impact or include land and merchant fleets, notorious moneylender, and so on. So there's a whole system built around ancestry and birthrights and honor and such. And here we go into honor. Gaining and losing honor, altering family honor, effects of honor. And talk about the base honor, the initial honor for each of the classes. Awarding honor and how that goes. So it's almost like a leveling. The level of honor is in constant flux. Money and equipment I won't spend too much time with. Same thing with weapons. And proficiencies. So the number of initial proficiencies, added proficiencies per level, non-proficiency weapon penalties. So how are they affected by using a non-proficient weapon? Weapon specialization comes into play here. There's artisan proficiencies, barbarian proficiencies of, let's let's say, chanting, fire building, running, signaling, snare building, sound imitation, survival, and tracking. Common proficiency. So you're starting to see, a much more diverse number of non-combat proficiencies and skills coming into play with this as well. You don't you don't quite get that in AD&D First Edition, Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, until you start getting to the Wilderness Survival Guide and the Dungeoneer's Survival Guide as well, where you get a lot more of these kind of proficiency thrown in there. And then we go to spells. You can see, I mean, it's 145 pages, and just like most the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition books, just packed with information. That's the one thing you do get a lot of. Most of this is a bulk of this book is going to be spells though, because you do have 2 spellcaster types, and so when they throw in that, I think I jumped right here. So events and encounters, martial arts. They talk about martial arts there. We're getting close to the end where they start talking about Karator. Here's the monster section. And magic. I mean, yes, I could probably sift through this and get and focus on magic items that are very specific to Oriental adventures, but that's just something that I'll leave for you to explore if you choose to run an Oriental Adventures campaign set in this setting. So life in Karator. And that's pretty much it. So again, this is a very important volume, and the in the collection of first edition AD&D, in that it introduces a lot of new concepts. It introduces modifications to the more westernized system of AD&D First Edition, especially like swapping out the monks from that to going along with this here. It has just a fully developed martial arts system. It has a new attribute with comeliness. It has the honor system, which I think is really important, and that I think you can actually easily carry over into your regular AD&D game, where you're having the importance of that family connection, because you could certainly do that. You can certainly do something along those lines if you're playing very traditional, knights and where family honor is kind of important as well. If you're doing kind of like a Game of Thrones type of campaign where your family connections are extremely important in your character development, there it lends itself. You certainly take pieces from this and export it to there, or take pieces of that and export it to here. And that's really what all of these supplements are meant to do, is to just give the the dungeon master additional options of how to, incorporate all of these different rules, or just set them aside. Don't actually use them, and just, use the parts that you like, or not. So really important, really important book. A book that I think is unfairly maligned, considering all of the intentions that went into producing this, for the sake of presenting the Far East in a positive and important light, in fully developing the world, and allowing your player characters to travel the world or experience other dramatically different cultures, again in a very respectful way, that I think is, that you can see in their writings, in those entry passages, of how much they were actually concerned, with presenting this in a positive way, and with the best of intentions. And they did a lot of studying in order to do that. And they did play testing, and they even brought in what I would call, in our modern, terminology, they brought in sensitivity readers in 1985, 1984. They brought in sensitivity readers to make sure that they were, expressing this, this material, and the least offensive way, and probably not offensive at all, in a time period. So, kudos to TSR, and everybody associated with this product. It's an excellent product to have. If you can get your hands on it for cheap, it's getting harder and harder to find it, for under $50. And so, it's certainly something that you'd want to include in there. And I am certainly taking a new look at this book. I am certainly considering, doing a separate campaign, using this instead of Bushido RPG, which I was using, because once again, the simplicity and my familiarity with this system is just, much higher than in that system as well. And it's just a great book to have. And so that is why this is still so playable. It's playable because there was a lot of care put into producing it, and it's so playable because it's a system that we're familiar with, and bottom line, it's just a fun system to play. So once again, Oriental Adventures, a classic piece of, supplemental material for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and it's definitely a must-have. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any comments, please feel free to leave your comments. Anything really negative, I'm not going to engage with. Anything, questioning or constructive, obviously I will respond to. And, just look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon. You have a great rest of your day, and yeah, get some Oriental Adventures into your gaming time. It's a good way to spread the word about this great game supplement. Have a great day.